Welcome to this episode of the Payments Show podcast. I'm your host Satwant Phull, and today I'll be speaking to Rowan Wilde, who is the co-founder and chief customer officer at HelpPay. HelpPay is a social impact fintech that makes it easier to share bills and help those in need to pay bills. It enables customers by giving them the simplest possible way to share their bills with family, friends, or their support network. Every payment made goes directly to the billing company instead of a personal bank account. If you're new to the show, this podcast aims to help you increase sales conversions in your company through the latest payment technologies and platforms. If you need help to improve your payment systems, please get in touch by visiting the website at thepayments.show, and you'll find the contact details in the show notes for each episode. Once again, the website is thepayments.show. Enjoy the episode. Rowan, welcome to the Payment Show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on. Are you joining from Australia, right?
I sure am, from Melbourne, Australia.
Are you indoors because your great leader's not letting you out, or you just for the podcast?
No, well, it's 6 p.m. at night here, and it's a pleasure to do this with you. But unfortunately, as much as I would love to be outside right now, I don't think listeners would appreciate the rustling of the leaves.
No worries at all. Well, that's great. So, yeah, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate the fact that we're going to talk about a very innovative solution. I first interviewed someone in the debt collection solution space a couple of years ago, and it just seemed for the last few years that all anyone seemed to want to do in the payments world is create a BNPL, buy now, pay later solution. And we have about 20 of those, or one every week, as it seems.
Yes.
But nothing in something so important that what you're doing, and only a handful of people seem to be doing. So really appreciate you coming on.
No, well, thank you for having me. And you're right, there are a lot of buy now, pay laters out there. And yeah, we have a really unique opportunity with HelpPay to make it easier to give and get help.
It seems like it's been a murder.
Yeah, just give it a second, sorry. It's always the way, isn't it? Always the way. Fortunately, the lights have passed. They haven't discovered me. It's all right.
That's cool. Yeah, I was going to say, so I want to set the scene in terms of HelpPay, in terms of the kind of problems it's addressing right now. I think that would be a nice way to sort of start and link it into the increasing cost of living and the fact that there's more and more people in debt right now because of increasing mortgages, energy, inflation. There's all sorts of stuff. But you actually provided some stats in preparation for this, which I found really interesting. That one of them, for example, was that 50% of some businesses found that customers needed assistance paying a bill at some point in the last 12 months. That seemed very high to me, so that was a surprising stat. But one which wasn't as surprising but still very important was that you found that people are willing to help others. 7 in 10, for example, say they will help to pay a family's bill, but just make it easier to do so. And this is something that I hear again and again, and I also experience it as a consumer. Poor UI, UX, no user testing by companies to think, well, how do people actually use our websites, our tools and technology? And so you're doing a very important thing in terms of the debt side, but also solving simple problems which should have been addressed a long time ago by most businesses, and they still haven't in terms of the user experience. I'd love to open it up to you, and maybe you can expand on that a bit more in terms of the problems that you're helping with.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I might start with what HelpPay does and is and why we are, why we exist, before we get into the detail, the nitty-gritty of the technology. Really simply, at its core, we believe helping should be easier. In whatever fashion that takes, it just shouldn't be as hard as it is to tell someone the kind of help you need and enable them to give it to you, while both parties, particularly when it comes to helping with bills, both parties know exactly where the money is going and it can't be disrupted from the intended target. So for the purposes of your listeners, HelpPay turns every bill in Australia into a shareable link and a unique payment page. And anyone with that link can help pay that bill, any part of it. So we turn bills from a one-to-one relationship to a one-to-many relationship. And when you pay some, most, or all of that bill, the money that you pay goes directly to the company. There is a plethora of peer-to-peer money giving apps. There's heaps of ways to send you 20 or 30 bucks. I can do it through banking apps and all these other apps, and they're fantastic. They have a role and a place. But what we realized as we were building HelpPay and we were thinking about HelpPay and talking to hundreds of business leaders around Australia about HelpPay to validate the idea was that there was nothing out there that businesses could promote and use and people could just use in their friend group or their family group for a short period of time or a long period of time to just say, hey, I've lost my job, or there's an illness, or we're going to look after mum for a bit because we all live in different states or different parts of the country. Let's just use a single platform that when you give you $20, $30 or pounds or whatever it is, the money goes right to that, right where it's needed. So if mum's put up an electricity bill and says, hey, I need a bit of help paying this, when you pay it, there's no double handling. There's no, okay, mum, I've sent you the money. Now you've got to transfer it. All of that's taken care of end to end with HelpPay in one seamless transaction. And when you HelpPay, you get a payment receipt straight away. And the person who's requested help can see who has helped and how much they have helped so that they know they're getting the support from their family and friends. And it's funny you mention buy now, pay later. Buy now, pay later is a huge, very popular invention. But what we see a lot of the places and in a lot of the world is it's really easy to get into debt, be it short-term debt, be it for that t-shirt you have to have, be it for that mobile phone you just can't live without, whatever it is, it's super easy to get into debt. But HelpPay is a debt prevention platform. What if you just didn't get into it in the first place? Because debt, short and manageable, fine. But if it becomes unmanageable, it can lead to years and years of very expensive, very emotional sometimes, payback periods. And it's really important that, not necessarily that, obviously we'd like people to understand before they get into debt. But if something is easier to do, more of it happens. And that's really where HelpPay is born.
I'd be interested to hear more details about what you're doing in the area of debt prevention. Clearly, the app helps people struggling with bills, but ultimately, you can't stop somebody buying things, right?
No, you can't. But what we know from our research is that people generally know when they won't be able to pay the bill that they owe. So the electricity bill comes in, the gas bill comes in, the water bill comes in, the mobile phone bill comes in, and those bills equal more than they have. They know that there's going to be a compromise, and they have a choice at that stage. Tell the company about it. Now I have to do that via phone. It's emotional. You have to come up with, you have to spend a bit of time on the phone, and really what you're asking for in those kind of fairly tense moments with that company is permission to pay late. And you hope it's going to go well, and you may never have found yourself in this situation before, because it's not just people overspending, not thinking. It's about people use us when they've had a car accident that may be absolutely none of their fault, but there's still costs. Or they've become injured or sick, or parents are going through a divorce and there's co-parenting and sharing costs. Where we play in the debt prevention space is making it really, really easy to, within seconds, give us a few details about your bill, and we turn it into a link that you can then share with your family and friends to say, hey, I can't afford this bill. Can you please help me not get into debt? Can you please help me not fall behind? And when we were validating this idea and talking about it with people before we built the technology, and then as we were building the technology, is every single person we spoke to, we couldn't go almost a week, a couple of days without someone would say, oh, I had that. Oh, my niece asked me for a couple of $100 for her gas bill. And the next time I saw her, she had a handbag and a new haircut, but still needed a couple of $100 for the gas bill. And everyone's response is, help is universal. This is the thing we learnt. Help is universal. People want to help. Whenever you hear a story of tragedy, oh my gosh, that's terrible. What can I do to help? But at the same time, when you want to help, you want reassurance that help is going to be what's needed to be helpful, and that it's actually going to go where the person or the people asking for the help say it's going to end up. And that's what HelpPay does. We, in our current technology, have a HelpPay promise that when you pay money towards a bill, that's exactly and only where it goes. It can't be diverted by the person asking for assistance. Oh, can you send that to my personal bank account? We simply don't allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because even in scenarios where you can trust somebody, just the friction of sending it somewhere as a first step, they can forget too. It's not that a trustworthy person is not going to do it, but they might just get busy and then forget, and you might get late payments and all sorts. So you're cutting out more than just the trust element. You're cutting out friction and error, chances for errors and mistakes, and just life getting in the way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's, whenever you see innovations around the world make something easier and shortcut a process while guaranteeing an outcome, you see more of it happening. Be that in transport, be that in communication, be that in travel, be that in lending, wherever it's easier and frictionless with sort of an assured outcome everyone understands, more of it happens. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying before, that, people are using HelpPay to look after their aging parents. On the other side of that, they're using HelpPay when their kids are going off to study in a different part of the country. I want to make sure that you're going to be okay, son, daughter. I want to make sure you're okay, mum. I live in this part of the country, you live in that part of the country. But there's no double handling. It's just you get the link, you pay it within a couple of seconds, within a couple of taps with your thumb, and it's just paid, and everyone knows it's paid, and there's no double handling, and as you say, no forgetting, no time delay. It's just done.
That benefit is actually something that business owners and sales directors listening would really appreciate, because you've got a feature that effectively creates net new customers. You mentioned grown-ups like us now, our generation, looking after our parents, and families just simply wanting to pay for things for their kids at university or whatever. That's just life stuff, and so it's a whole bunch of net new customers could come into your business by just giving this kind of facility, which was excellent.
Yeah, it's also that's absolutely right. It's an opportunity for businesses to grow new customers, but also grow great paying customers with a lot less risk. Where we know the downstream effects of non-payment. We've mapped this journey end to end in a lot of industries. And what tends to happen is you miss a payment, you then send follow-up communications, that costs. And you've got lower cash flow because the money hasn't come in. And then you've got to get your staff to call them, and there's processes and meetings and more outreach and communications, and emails are sent and SMSs are sent and letters are printed and postage. All of these downstream costs while your business chases someone who may not want to talk to you because they're embarrassed that they can't pay. But if you make it really easy for them to just flick the link onto their mum and dad and say, hey, bit of a tight spot, XYZ reason, can you please just help me out this month? And the bill's paid. Well, from a business point of view, you don't even know that your customer has skipped a beat. And, hopefully by avoiding that moment of failure, you save a lot of costs in that moment and downstream. The customer's happier because they didn't have to make all these phone calls, they weren't racked with guilt, and they didn't have to find time. And at the same time, you're having a really seamless experience with your customers because you don't have all this friction in between a segment of your customers, maybe once a year, maybe multiple times a year. And sometimes just not having that financial anxiety gives your customers that headspace and that sort of emotional break to then get themselves back on track, to not wanting to pick up the phone because a couple of companies are chasing them, because they're not being chased because a couple of friends or family helped out.
Yeah, never underestimate the impact of just feeling ashamed and the guilt side of it. And if technology can remove that, there have been apps where you remove the shame of something and the success of that business just skyrockets. But I just can't think of one right now off the top of my head that does that.
Well, we're absolutely focused on removing the stigma around asking for help when it comes to paying a bill or paying for something. I would much rather spend $50 helping pay someone's bill than maybe making a lasagna and giving them a bottle of wine and, oh, there, mate, you'll be all right. Now, they're going to have dinner for a night and they'll have a drink and they'll have a full stomach for one night, but tomorrow they're going to wake up and the gas bill and the water bill and the electricity bill is still going to need to be paid. I would so much rather, and we've seen this in our research as well, people would rather give the help that helps and they know that it helps, because telling someone what you need help for is such a gift. Where a lot of helping falls down, as you said before, is in the complexity, but it's also in that, I don't know what you need. I don't know, would that be helpful for you? Is that convenient? I don't know. Do you need that? Whereas if, Satwant, if we were brothers or really great, terrific friends, and you said, hey mate, things are just a bit dicey at the moment. Can you help me out? Sure. Send me a bill. I'll pay it for you. Not a problem. Let's keep your water connected. Let's keep your kids fed. Let's keep them warm at night. Let's keep the broadband on so you can go search for a job, whatever it is that you need. Because it's not just about the money. Paying a bill buys time. That's the thing that it actually buys. It's really for that person, taking that stress lever off, that unknown number that's calling you. It's taking that handbrake off. Oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Because we've also seen in research that we've conducted and we've seen from Australian research agencies, is that when people are experiencing financial anxiety, there's a group of people that tend to head towards more risky behaviours, such as gambling or consumption of alcohol or tobacco or other substances, to either get away from the problem or hope to solve the problem with a big win. Now, more often than not, unfortunately, what that means is that they have even less money than when they started, and the problem hasn't gone away. And again, it's this spiral of debt and financial anxiety that we believe can be prevented. Because at the end of the day, a fence at the top of the hill is better than an ambulance at the bottom of it.
To expand on that, one thing that made me really happy, which I didn't know from my initial research, was that your service can help in scenarios such as partners, husband and wife, that are separating, and it can de-escalate arguments and fighting through your app. And the other benefit of escaping violence at home. So I remember reading a few years ago, a police officer was saying I think it was Victoria actually, that if a man loses his job and has to pay lots of debts, mortgage, the usual stuff as we've been talking about, they can drink and start getting violent at home. And this police officer said it just pushes guys over the edge. Now, that doesn't mean it's an excuse to get violent, but at the end of the day, what he was trying to sort of get to was the point that somebody can only take so much, and what that person does next, obviously depending on their personality and what they like and how they handle stress, could end up in violence. And just to learn that about how your app can prevent these issues was amazing, and I think that's highly beneficial and commendable. So yeah, that was very impressive.
Oh, thank you. We are a social impact fintech, if I can call us that. We are, yes, we're a merchant for companies. Yes, we are a payment platform, but we are an enablement platform, and we're trying to create this social impact, this destigmatization that talking about or asking for help with money is a bad or scary thing. I might just quickly talk about the legal and the family and the domestic violence thing for a second. When it comes to family law and divorce, one of the most tense times in a relationship is during that, not just during separation, but in the months and years after that, where there's children involved. Yes, there are orders for child support, but things come out of the blue. Our son needs a new iPhone. Our daughter crashed the car and there's an insurance payout, whatever it is. People really, it's a very high intense, high emotional, negative emotional moment for people to send large amounts of money to their ex-partners who they may not like very much, but typically, generally speaking, people still love their kids. But you're not going to interrogate your child to find out whether the money that you sent to mum, your ex-partner, really reached them. And so how we've partnered with a law firm here in Victoria, and what we're talking about with other law firms at the moment is this is a sort of an independent arbitrator. One of the partners, separated partners, puts a bill into the app, shares the link. Both partners, ex-partners, have total visibility of what that bill is for, how much it's owed, when it's owed, and what their share of that bill is. They also know that when they make that payment, their money is not going to the other person's bank account. It's going directly to the mobile company, or it's going to school fees or the uniform shop or whatever it is. You also have a transaction record. So if there's ever a dispute in the future, I paid it. No, you didn't. Okay, well, here's my email receipt for when I did. And so that's, from a legal point of view and a diffusion of argument point of view, incredibly powerful, because in the app, both people can see exactly what's happening and when. And there's also less anger leading up to when the money is required, because if a bill isn't due for 7 days, before you fire off angry texts and WhatsApp messages, you can just see in the app whether your ex-partner has paid or not. Whether they have or they haven't, you know that they've still got another week to go. And most importantly, you know they have the same visibility. When it comes to domestic abuse, and it's mainly domestic abuse victims and victim survivors are mainly women. Sometimes they're women with children. It's devastating. And the stats vary, but it's high 90%. Some studies say it's high as 99% of domestic and family violence is coupled with financial abuse, where the perpetrator has control of the finances. Now, that's incredibly and deliberately limiting for a victim survivor to try and escape and get out of that scenario. Where HelpPay plays a role is in the ability to get payments to, say, set up a new rental agreement, to set up a new electricity account, and to have your support network or even welfare agencies, because it's not just people who can pay into this. Welfare agencies can pay the bills through HelpPay as well. You know, like a Salvation Army or a Red Cross or whoever the welfare agency is, they can help people escape. HelpPay can help people escape domestic and family violence, because really importantly, for the first time, money isn't going into the bank account over which that victim survivor has no control. And you can only imagine the scenarios. Really, it's awful to think about, where people are trying to escape domestic violence and all of a sudden random large sums of money appear in a bank account over which they have no control. That perpetrator is going to ask, what's this for? Why is it there? And this way, the victim survivor can escape without those payments to secure that new rental, that new housing, whatever it is that they need to get out of their situation. It all happens without touching a bank account, so that that person can safely get out and doesn't escalate the situation further. I'll tell you some of the other stats. What we know with HelpPay is that there's about 2.1 million Australians right now. And the population of Australia is about 25 million, 26 million. It's 2.1 million people in financial stress. 110,000 sleep rough every night. There's 2.7 million carers for the 4.2 million people over 65 years of age. 4.9 million Australians live with a chronic illness. 2.2 million victim survivors of physical and sexual violence. 3.6 have experienced emotional abuse. And 1 in 6 children grow up in poverty and disadvantage, that we know, if the cycle doesn't change, will continue that disadvantage into their adult life. And so when you think about what 20 or 30 bucks worth of help can do, I'd spend more on bad coffee every year. Most people would, right? Or a terrible pizza, or half a premium movie ticket. To think that that could help alleviate someone for the next 20, 30 days, to take away that worry, to take away that concern, to also demonstrate just straight up that you love them and care for them. If we can start to build a platform and really focus on some of those core numbers, then job done as far as we're concerned. If we can help make this change and people's lives are improved in the short term, that then leads to a medium term, that leads to a longer term change, and also leads to sort of an evolution or a social change, or a change in discourse around, I need a bit of help, can you help me out? That's what we're doing this for in large respects, because it just changes people's lives for the better, and that makes a better society, and then we're all better off. It sounds a bit, come on man, is this a pipe dream? But we know that when we help people, there's enough stats out there, when people are helped and avoid bad situations, they go on to generally either get the help they need or right themselves and get back on their feet.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that.
No worries.
Even more surprises. So you're working with legal firms proactively. welfare agencies, which I didn't even consider. So that's amazing stuff.
Every time we talk to someone about what our platform does, a handful of new options pop up. I can't say who they are. We're also talking to radio stations because they often do giveaways, right? Call in this week and tell us why you need your bill paid. And how radio competitions work often is they just give away the cash into a bank account. And where HelpPay can help is the customer or the winning listener sends the bill in via HelpPay and the money's in their account directly to not just the company, but the account at that company where the money is owed right away.
Yep. Excellent. One thing I've noticed that's very different here as well, being in the tech industry like we all are, we're always reading about the latest startups, and all that they seem to talk about for years now is, we've raised Series A funding or Series B funding. It seems like the idea of actually creating a business with a strong foundation seems to have gone straight out the window. It's just that money's free, basically. The cost of money is nothing. And so let's just go crazy. And you've just talked so many times, I've noticed in this conversation, the research we've done for this, for that, the research we looked at for XYZ problem showed this, and you've created features based on that. I think it would be really interesting to talk about that as a bit of a side topic.
Sure.
How and why you've got such a strong foundation. And it seems crazy to say this. Why have you built a business to solve a real problem profitably, what seems to me, and for the long term, whereas most startups just seem to be throwing money, billions of dollars at ideas which seem cool, but you could do without, perhaps.
I'll talk about why we did what we did. Maybe that will help answer it. I can't speak for other companies. I'm happy that people are motivated and focused in their organizations. HelpPay came about because a few of the people involved in the very genesis of the idea were sitting around talking about what was happening in their lives, and nearly every person at the table that night at the dinner table knew someone who was doing it tough. Someone had lost a job, someone had just gotten sick, another person had been in hospital and they were never able to work again. And every single person's response was exactly the same. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. What can I do to help? And that's where the conversation stopped, because while well-intentions are well-intentions and people were really genuine with their intentions, it was just so hard to actually get the money where it needed to go. And you didn't know, what do I do? Do I call this person up and just offer them $50? Will that solve it? I don't know. How much is enough? Is it $200? Do you even need money? Maybe you just need the dog walked. And so we're not saying that HelpPay is, the one and only way to help people. Not at all. It's just making something that's actually quite difficult very, very easy. And it is hard. I'd say this, it's a real pleasure to work for a fintech with a purpose and a social good and a social impact that we know will improve people's lives. By staying out of debt, you're less anxious, you've got less financial stress in your life, frees you up to think to how can I proactively move myself forward and make sure this doesn't happen again. It's really exciting and it's really, really fun.
I love it.
I will also just add, if I can, that when we looked around at what HelpPay does, and we believe we are a world first, we can't find another company anywhere that does what we do, that anyone can upload their bill, turn that into a link in a payment page, turn what is normally one payment into almost indivisible, infinite number of payments from, dozens and dozens of people, sending the money right to the company. That company then saves on cash flow, lower overheads, better quality customers, better paying customers. We couldn't find anyone that does it. There are some companies that do the front half. There are some companies that do the back half. And there are some companies that wait until they hit debt and they're innovating in debt collection. And it's all great, but we believe we're a world first in what we're doing, and we're enabled by fantastic companies like Stripe and BPay, which is a organization in Australia that deals and organizes payments, presents a payment standard to hundreds of thousands of companies in Australia. And really, if it wasn't for sort of that kind of technology mix, this would have been even harder to start and even harder to get off the ground, because there are many, many different standards in other countries for other companies.
Yeah, the pace at which you can innovate on new products is increasing because we've already got great technology now.
HelpPay in a large part came from spending a bit of time with Google and NASA, and I worked really closely with Google throughout my career when I was head of digital for Medibank and Australia's largest health insurance company and their entire insurance portfolio and energy companies here. Spend a lot of time with Google just trying to understand how people think and act and behave. And I heard this quote, and I can't remember exactly where I heard this stat, but it was something along the lines of, if you have a problem and a few more people that you talk to have a problem, and then when they talk to the other people, they can describe it and those people have the same problem, you have a business. You have a business. So it was a really nice little formula. I can't remember the specifics, and I can't even remember if it was someone from Google that said it. It might have been, someone else that was there on the day. But yeah, the way we describe HelpPay sometimes is nobody needed Facebook, right? Yeah. I already knew where you lived. I already had your mobile number. I could already text you. I could send photos to your phone. I could print them out. I could drop them around to your house. I could send you a letter. I could send you a fax. I could do whatever.
Yeah.
But Facebook was easier. So you did it, right? You already had telephone directories. You already knew where the local store was to get everything you needed. You already knew where the department store was. But someone went, you know what? I should be able to type that in my keyboard. Google was easier. And so that's where, without trying to get too ahead of ourselves or anything like that, that the idea of easier, better, and beneficial, and that sort of tri-sided piece of it really comes together.
I want to focus on the business side of things.
Sure.
Your solution helps increase sales conversions and reduce costs. And the other thing that you shared was that energy sector, you expected it to be a significant part of your business, and it is, but you also mentioned it isn't as overweight as you thought, and there's other companies that tend to be popular on the HelpPay app. It'd be good to just share with people, businesses listening, how that is working and the opportunities for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been live in market since December last year. We have thousands and thousands of Australians already using our service and more than 200 bill brands in Australia. Every big brand you can think of in Australia, every large insurance company, every energy company, every bank, people are, using it to help pay all sorts of things, council rates, for any sort of fee notices, loans, anywhere where they owe money and they need a bit of help and they're asking from their family and friends. We've got just around $500,000 worth of bill debt in our company, in our system at the moment that people are asking for help for. And the really interesting thing that we sort of recognize that is both a responsibility and a privilege is that these people trust us with this information because we know when they need help before they might have told anybody else. That's a real privilege. And for the people that, get a little bit of help or get all their bill paid by their family and friends through HelpPay, the companies that they're with, as I sort of referred to earlier, save an inordinate amount of phone calls and hours on the phone and emails and just handling customers. And I'm sure these businesses do it to the best of their ability, but it's still a cost from people who've missed a bill for a couple of days through to several months and the debt is climbing. And so the opportunity in there is to add HelpPay as a payment option right up front. So your customers, when they know that they're going to miss a bill, but they may not want to have to make that phone call and spend hours on the phone or emails back and forth, they can just discreetly go off and get the help that they need. They don't need to share that information, that private life information with the company. They don't actually maybe even want the company to know that they've had a bit of a hiccup in their life. They just want to get on with their life. And resharing that story and that why behind they're going to miss it, for some people is actually an anxious moment. So just make it really easy for your customers. Give them the ability to pay the bill or get help paying the bill discreetly, silently. Business gets paid on time. When these payments come through to us, we pass it on almost immediately. And then the customer goes on their merry way. The business is happy because the customer looks like they're paying on time. And all of these downstream costs and processes are avoided. And ultimately, if those people start getting into debt and fewer people go through that debt process, there's less people to send to debt collection agencies later, which is an incredibly costly process in two ways. One, you get cents back on the dollar, if you get much back at all, for the debt owed. But you also write that customer off, which means that you then have to go spend a lot more money acquiring a new customer to maintain your market share, because you wrote off a customer who owed you, money. And fair enough. That's the company's process. But maybe it could have all been avoided if they'd just been able to quickly, silently, digitally, easily, on their mobile, with their thumb, couple of seconds, got help from mum.
Yeah, no, great. Talking about the app and how you're working with so many businesses, I'd love to talk about your growth, because you said you got $500,000 worth of debt in the system, and you've only been in business a short time, so that's great. Obviously, I don't have context for longer history of your company, but initially that sounds great. So I wanted to talk about how these users found out about you guys. You mentioned, I think, that companies are pushing or recommending your solution. Am I right there? And is it kind of just organic growth mainly so far?
It's mainly organic growth. We've got a partnership with an exclusive energy partnership with a company called Tango Energy in Australia. They're absolutely fantastic. They have put us on their website and promoting us on their social media, and we're working with them at the moment to talk about how we sit in with their various conversations with customers or email communications, those kind of next steps in that process with customers, just as an option. And again, it doesn't have to be a tragedy to use HelpPay. You could just be looking after someone because you love them, your mum or your dad or your brother or whomever. It's just family looking after family. It's mainly organic growth at the moment. We've done a bit of social media activity, but coming back to what you said before about, fintech with a heart, we've been really lucky that we got some national media on one of the large TV stations here, Channel 9, who talked about us as a Melbourne innovation, but also for all of the reasons we've talked about today on your podcast, that it's just an easy, great thing to do, to ask and give a bit of help and know where it's going. So that really helped us as well. We got a lot of attention off the back of that. And that's also led to a lot of business inquiry with other organizations in energy and other verticals.
Yeah. Seems to be a common theme all around the world. The energy bills are just shooting up so much. It's crazy. They've gone up here in the UK massively. I heard someone recently tell me that their bill a couple of quarters ago was like £100. Last quarter was £200, and they're expecting the next one to be closer to £5. And, that kind of, it's not even inflation. It's not even cost of living. It's just, I don't even know what the word is for it. There'll be a lot of people who just will have to make some really tough decisions, and or a combination of tough decisions, and simply won't be able to pay. Yeah. Well, that's another conversation. I could get very angry about that, but I think that's probably a conversation for the environmental podcast, I think. So we've covered a lot there. I wanted to finish up with a couple of simpler questions. So businesses that are looking to sort of set this up, if you will, or start using it for their customers, the technical difficulty, how quickly can they do it? Because you're working on an open API right now, which you mentioned. But yeah, just generally, just integration, how quickly can I set it up if I'm a sales director? What can we do?
Yeah, so we already integrate automatically because of our BPay relationship with every business in Australia that uses BPay. You would know BPay, having lived in Sydney. BPay's on like every bill, right? There's no BPay anywhere else on the planet. It doesn't exist, right? So BPay is owned, as you know, by the big four banks in Australia.
Yep.
So setting us up in Australia, if you're with BPay, is incredibly easy and very, very quick. And really the answer is a combination of two things. It depends, and we can almost go as fast as the business wants to go. So obviously some larger organizations, a bit more complexity, other organizations, less complexity and are able to go faster. But we have a couple of levels of integration that we aren't quite ready to put public yet. BPay doesn't exist in the US. It doesn't exist in the UK. So we have to go build an open API that allows any company anywhere to reconcile its data and numbers and file structures and all the rest, and then reconcile back to the individual on whatever their billing coding is, not just for the account, but for the not just for the individual, but they might have 4 or 5 accounts with that business. So which one is the money owed to? Because it won't just be like Rowan Wilde, 5 services, big bucket.
Yeah.
It'll be Rowan Wilde Mobile, Rowan Wilde Energy, Rowan Wilde Gas, Rowan Wilde Solar.
Yeah.
So we have to go figure all that out. But if any of you listeners want to get in contact, we can absolutely talk to them about what they are and how to go about activating HelpPay.
So on that note, I want to mention your contact details. So it's HelpPay, that's 2 P's, .com.au.
Yes.
And facebook.com/HelpPay.
Yes. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, it's just Rowan Wilde on LinkedIn, co-founder and chief customer officer of HelpPay.
Yeah, perfect. I'll put your details in the show notes as well.
Great, thank you.
Well, we've covered a lot. Is there anything maybe I might have missed that you want to cover off?
Only that, particularly for businesses, the area of innovation that's one of the hardest is the accounts receivable area. The tried and tested methods that are in place today have been in place for a really long time. And that's great. That's fine. They do the job you expect them to do. But if you don't change the input, it's really hard to change an output. And so if you want to think differently, if you want to innovate, give your customers a really fantastic, friendly option where they can spend a bit of time sort of controlling and discreetly taking care of their problems, Google HelpPay and have a think about us.
Yeah, great stuff. And one personal question I have, actually,
Sure.
Thinking back to my 20s when I moved to Australia and knowing lots of Australians moved to London and seems to live in one room together.
I did that, but I went to Manchester. So I moved to Manchester for a while. I've got family in the south of England. I moved to Manchester because the cost of living was a lot lower and the salary wasn't that far off London. So
that makes me very happy. You were one of the non-conformists. I like it. So the context of the question was, I mean, when I was in Sydney in the 2000s, when I first moved in my first apartment there, I could have done with some help from my parents buying a sofa or something or other.
Sure.
And vice versa for Aussies in the UK, they might want the same. So I know you guys are not in the UK yet, I think. But can somebody internationally pay on a credit card through HelpPay? Probably not, I'd imagine, right now.
Not at the moment, but it's definitely on our roadmap. Cross-border is something that's in our sort of near to mid-term. Our next step is, get Australia right and then look to the countries where you have high inflows and outflows to Australia. America, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, India, Indonesia. These are sort of our sort of the countries that we're eyeballing, because exactly to your point, there's a lot of people in Australia who send money home to look after mum and dad a bit at the moment. And, love is universal, but a wallet isn't. And, you need to make sure that if you're going to give your son who's disappeared off to Sydney for a while, that he's spending it where it's meant to go. As much as the local bar economy, I'm sure, appreciates the generosity of visiting parents, children's parents. But, at the same time, parents like to make sure that their kids are taking care of themselves. And if you want to spend your own money on beer and nights out, that's on you.
There were so many people I knew at university who just blew their grants within the first 2 weeks on booze and going out, and then they were stuck. Then they had to work non-stop, for the rest of the year, which is crazy. But hopefully this will bring it to an end.
And look, it's a universal thing, isn't it? This is what we're really talking about. We're just talking about simple, really honest, almost unspoken. You don't talk about this. You just know that it happens. Behavior, which is, I just want to make sure you're okay. But I also want to make sure it gets where it's meant to go. And look, there's opportunities in education. There's all sorts of places and businesses and organizations we're talking to.
Great stuff. So I want to finish on a couple of light points which you shared, which I really appreciate. Not everybody answers this question. Something that almost nobody agrees with you on. I'd love for you to expand on that.
So I think what I said was that every time you see a problem reported in the news, thousands of people are working to solve that problem.
Yeah, I've definitely not heard that one before.
I would think about it in the context of climate change. For years, decades past, climate change is coming, climate change is a problem, but there isn't a great news story in cat didn't climb tree, firefighters not called, right? And so what actually we got to think about is you're seeing that story for a reason, and there are thousands and thousands of people trying to solve that problem. And it's just opened up some really fascinating conversations. I was talking with a friend recently about big issues, and I'm an optimistic person by nature, and I'm just confident that there are very smart people out there solving a lot of the world's problems. And you see it all the time. Cancer mortality rates are dropping all the time because there are thousands and thousands of people working to solve those problems, and that's fantastic.
That's a really good way of thinking about things.
Do you disagree with me, Satwant? Let's discuss.
I see myself as a pessimistic optimist. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I think it's an oncoming train. So it's a different perspective.
Look, in a lot of ways, change is a constant on a lot of fronts.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that in a lot of ways we're going to solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, on the climate change one, I think that really the problem to solve it faster is to cut pollution. That's an easy one that people understand, because you can't solve climate change, right? If you just said to somebody, can you do something in your house to solve climate change? It doesn't really mean much, but just cut pollution, because it means that means you've got to cut consumption. Governments and businesses are not really going to promote such a simple message. So, but that's yeah, it's
that feels like a whole new podcast. That feels like a whole new podcast. That one.
It's the Minimalists podcast. Yeah. And just the last one, you recommended a book that I've never heard of by Alex Pentland called Social Physics.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Alex Pentland's book, Social Physics: Why Great Ideas Get Shared, I think is the title. I might have paraphrased it. And essentially it's about the science of what it takes to get an idea to the point of sharing it. I actually heard it on a British podcast, or it might have been a Harvard Business Review podcast many years ago. And it was just about how to get ideas shared and how to sort of get the rock rolling and growing and changing. And it was just a fascinating book, and I'd recommend it if you're interested.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was uplifting because of what you're doing. I hate seeing people in trouble. That was really insightful, and I expect big things from HelpPay. I think this will expand like crazy because of the huge sort of knock-on effects of everything that you're helping your customers to do. So it was a real pleasure to have you on, and I'm glad you accepted. I want to share your contact details again because I think it's very important. So it's helppay.com.au. That's 2 P's in the middle. And facebook.com/helppay. And I'll also put your LinkedIn contact details in the show notes.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for having me on, Satwant. Really enjoy your podcast. I've listened to it for a little while now. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you need help to improve your payment systems, please get in touch by visiting the website at thepayments.show, and you'll find the contact details in the show notes for each episode. Once again, the website is thepayments.show. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode.